Good morning, everyone. Before I get started on this article, I just wanted to, and talking about the music industry, I just want to tell you that I love the 60s and 70s and even the 80s music. That's all I listened to. And when I found out the truth some years ago, I was devastated to say the least. So I've been trying to figure out a way to ease us into the music industry and how a lot of artists' families were in the military prior to these people becoming famous. Just off the top of my head, there's David Crosby, Jim Morrison, Frank Zappa, and I'm going to do my best to break it all down in a series of videos. I want to start at the I won't start at the beginning because the deception runs so deep that there's no, I would have to go back to Operation Paperclip, you know, or is it Operation or Project? I'm not sure. Anyway, I've got so much swirling around in my head and it's hard for me to keep it all straight. So I'll do the best to provide, the best receipts I can. And I've been doing research to try to bring the best article to start this out with, and hopefully through the way, I can come across some declassified documents through this. So again, I love this music. I skim through it. I love the Mamas and the Papas. I love Crosby, Stills and Nash. Frank Zappa's never been one of my favorites, but there's quite a few out there that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I went through denial, and then how the process goes, and then you have to face the facts. And what I've learned to do is separate myself from just enjoy the music and not dwell on the truth of it all, because music will never be like that again. Excuse me. So this is from winterwatch.net, and it's called Laurel Canyon Military Intelligence Family Backgrounds of the Iconic 60s Counterculture Rock Stars. Note, the source of the information contained in the following post comes from Dave McGowan's book, Inside the LC, The Strange but Mostly True Story of Laurel Canyon and the Birth of the Hippie Generation. I have surveyed the key points as related to the iconic counterculture rock stars that emerged out of Los Angeles' Laurel Canyon. Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. Let me get a quick drink. Now that I'm 5 years deep into my awakening, I finally come to appreciate what a key researcher Dave McGowan was. He died in 2015 at the age of 55 of, quote, fast-going pancreatic cancer, unquote. And I feel like he was given cancer. The pedophocracy is a term coined by McGowan as the title It is the title of his book on the subject of pedophilia as an elite characteristic and one of the main tools of control of the visible ruling Kakistak. Kakistak. I can't say that word. By the crime syndicate or cabal. He dug into the vast deceptions of 9/11 as well. So we can see why he was probably taken out. Most of McGowan's work and interviews can still be found on YouTube and elsewhere, and he has several books. I'm in the process of picking through them. I previously wrote a post called The Use of Cultists and Serial Killers in Death Squad Hits, that based in part on McGowan's book, Programmed to Kill, The Politics of Serial Murder. McGowan interview on Laurel Canyon and the hippie scene. Charlie Manson hung out with the Laurel Canyon cadre. My view on Charlie Manson, Sherlock says, Charlie Manson's story doesn't add up. And it doesn't. And I'm going to talk about that too. I mean, it goes deep, you guys. Really deep. Okay, Laurel Canyon, the font of hippie flower child movement. The followed is a condensed, abridged version of key takeaways from McGowan's book Inside the LC. In a geographically and socially isolated community known as Laurel Canyon, a heavily wooded, rustic, serene, yet vaguely ominous slice of LA nestled in the hills that separate the LA basin from the San Fernando Valley. Musicians, singers, and songwriters suddenly began to gather as though summoned there by some unseen Pied Piper. Within months, the hippie flower child movement will be given birth there, along with the new style of music that will provide the soundtrack for the tumultuous second half of the 1960s. It was the major record labels, not upstart independents, that signed Laurel Canyon's newly formed bands. It was the major labels that provided them with instruments and amplifiers. It was the major labels that provided them with studio time and session musicians. The bands themselves were initially lacking in skilled musicians and were very manufactured. It was the major labels that recorded, mixed, and arranged their albums. It was the major labels that released and then heavily promoted those albums. And so, as not to be left out, the corporate titans of all three branches of the mainstream media, print, radio, and television, did their part to help out the titans of the music industry. Thus, we see once more that such movements were not organic. Despite being counterculture, quote, threats, these bands' members were never busted for long on drug charges. Nobody was ever drafted for the Vietnam War. The bands were largely indifferent to the anti-war movement. There were large numbers of strange deaths in the scene. Early in the years of its heyday, Laurel Canyon's father figure is the rather eccentric personality known as Frank Zappa, 1940 to 1993. Though he and his various mothers of invention lineups will never attain the commercial success of some of the other bands, Zappa will be a hugely influential figure among his contemporaries. Somehow, at 25, Zappa ensconced himself in an abode dubbed the Log Cabin, which sat right in the heart of Laurel Canyon at the crossroads of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Lookout Mountain Avenue. Zappa will play host to virtually every musician who passes through Laurel Canyon in the mid to late 1960s. The log cabin was a cavernous 5-level home that featured a 2,000 plus square foot living room with 3 massive chandeliers and an enormous floor to ceiling stone fireplace. And right here's a picture of it, you guys. Right there. Zappa will also discover and sign numerous acts to his various Laurel Canyon-based record labels, including psychedelic rocker, Come Shock rocker, Alice Cooper, who will go on to superstardom. Zappa never really made a secret of the fact that he had nothing but contempt for the hippie culture that he helped create and that he surrounded himself with. By numerous accounts, he was a rigidly authoritarian control freak and a supporter of U.S. military actions in Southeast Asia. With a ringmaster who always wanted to be in control, he never used drugs. Zappa's father, Francis, had also little regard for the youth culture of the 1960s. He was a chemical warfare specialist assigned to the Edgewood Arsenal. Edgewood is a longtime home of America's chemical warfare program, as well as a facility frequently cited as being deeply embellished in MK Ultra operations. Curiously enough, Frank Zappa literally grew up at the Edgewood Arsenal, having lived the first 7 years of his life in military housing on the grounds of the facility. The family later moved to Lancaster, California, near Edwards Air Force Base, where Francis Zappa continued to busy himself with doing classified work for the military intelligence complex. His son, meanwhile, prepped himself to become an icon of the peace and love crowd. Later in life, Zappa went off the rails and spoke frankly about his role as an actor in this charade and provided insights into what was going down in the real world. Like David McGowan, Zappa died of a virulent form of cancer at age 52. Here's a quote from Frank Zappa. The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery, they will pull back the curtains, they will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater. And here's another quote: politics is the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex." Crazy, huh? Okay. Zappa's manager was a shadowy Jewish character by the name of Herb Cohen, who had come out to L.A. from the Bronx with his brother Mutt just before the music and club scene began heating up. Cohen, a former U.S. Marine, had spent a few years traveling the world before his arrival on the Laurel Canyon scene. Those travels curiously had taken him to the Congo in 1961, at the time that the leftist Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba was being tortured and killed by the CIA. Not to worry, though, according to one of Zappa's biographers, Cohen wasn't in the Congo on some kind of nefarious intelligent mission. No, he was there, believe it or not, to supply arms to Lumumba in defiance of the CIA. Because, that's the kind of thing that globe-trotting ex-Marines did in those days. Making up the other half of Laurel Canyon's first family is Frank's wife, Gail Zappa, formerly known as Adelaide Sloatman. Gail hails from a long line of career naval officers, including her father, who spent his life working on classified nuclear weapons research for the U.S. Navy. Gail herself had once worked as a secretary for the Office of Naval Research and Development. She also told an interviewer that she had heard voices all of her life. Many years before their nearly simultaneous arrival in Laurel Canyon, Gail had attended a naval kindergarten with Mr. Mojo Rison himself, Jim Morrison. It is claimed that as children, Gail once hit Jim over the head with a hammer. The very same Jim Morrison had later attended the same Alexandria, Virginia high school as two future Laurel Canyon luminaries, John Phillips and Cass Elliott, Mamas and the Papas. Jim Morrison of the Doors' father, George S. Morrison, commanded the First Fleet during the Gulf of Tonkin incident, false flag, that led to an escalation of the Vietnam War. Aboard the flagship carrier Bonhomme Richard, Mr. Morrison commanded an American naval forces in the Gulf when the destroyer Maddox engaged 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats on August the 2nd, 1964. A skirmish and confused reports of a second engagement 2 days later led President Lyndon B. Johnson to order airstrikes against North Vietnam and to request from Congress what became known as the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, allowing him to carry out further military operations without declaring war. Morrison had no real interest in music, nor did he play instruments. The first to drop an album were the Byrds, whose biggest star will prove to be David Crosby. The band's debut effort, Mr. Tambourine Man, will be released on the summer solstice of 1965. It will quickly be followed by releases from the John Phillips-led Mamas and Papas, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, January 1966, Love with Arthur Lee, Love, May 1966. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Freak Out, June 1966. Buffalo Springfield, featuring Stephen Stills and Neil Young, Buffalo Springfield, October 1966. And The Doors, January 1967. Papa John Phillips, more so than probably any of the other illustrious residents of Laurel Canyon, will play a major role in spreading the emerging youth counterculture across America. His contribution will be twofold. First, he will co-organize, along with Manson associate Terry Melcher, the famed Monterey Pop Festival, which, though unprecedented media exposure, will give mainstream America its first real look at the music and fashions of the nascent hippie movement. Second, Phillips will pen an insipid song known as San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair, which will quickly rise to the top of the charts. Along with the Monterey Pop Festival, the song will be instrumental in luring the disenfranchised, a preponderance of whom are underage runaways, to San Francisco to create the Haight Ashbury phenomenon and the famed 1967 Summer of Love. John Edmund Andrew Phillips was, drumroll please, yet another child of the military intelligence complex. The son of U.S. Marine Corps Captain Claude Andrew Phillips and a mother who claimed to have psychic and telekinetic powers, John attended a series of elite military prep schools in the Washington, D.C. area, culminating in an appointment to the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy of Annapolis. After leaving Annapolis, John married Susie Adams, a direct descendant of founding father John Adams. Susie's father, James Adams Jr., had been involved in what Susie described as a cloak and dagger stuff with Air Force in Vienna, or what we like to call covert intelligence operations. Susie herself would later find employment at the Pentagon alongside John Phillips's older sister, Rosie, who dutifully reported to work at the complex for nearly 30 years. John's mother, Denny Phillips, also worked for most of her life for the federal government in some unspecified capacity. Before succeeding in his musical career, however, Phillips did seem to find himself, quite innocently of course, in some rather unusual places. One such place was Havana, Cuba, where Phillips arrived at the very height of the Cuban Revolution. He had another of Laurel Canyon's earliest and brightest stars, Mr. Stephen Stills, will have the distinction of being a founding member of two of Laurel Canyon's most acclaimed and beloved bands, Buffalo Springfield and, needless to say, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Before his arrival in Laurel Canyon, Stephen Stills was the product of yet another career military family. Raised partly in Texas, young Stephen spent large swaths of his childhood in El Salvador, Costa Rica, the Panama Canal Zone, and various other parts of Central America, alongside his father, who was, we can be fairly certain, helping to spread democracy to the unwashed masses in that endearing American way. As with the rest of our cast characters, Steele was educated primarily at schools on military bases and at elite military academies. Among his contemporaries in Laurel Canyon, he was widely viewed as having an abrasive, authoritarian personality. Stephen would later tell everyone who will sit and listen that he had served time for Uncle Sam in the jungles of Vietnam. David Crosby, founding member of the seminal Laurel Canyon band, The Byrds, as well as, of course, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Crosby is, in another coinkydink, the son of an Annapolis graduate and World War II military intelligence officer, Major Ford Delafield Crosby. Like others in the story, Floyd Crosby spent much of his post-service time traveling around the world, including the 1927 U.S. Marine occupation of Haiti. David Van Cortlandt Crosby, as it turns out, is a scion of the closely intertwined Van Cortlandt, Van Schuler, and Van Rensselaer families. If you plug those names in over at Wikipedia, which, by the way, I do not trust at all. Wikipedia conveniently leaves out stuff. Anyway, you can spend a pretty fair amount of time reading up on the power wielded by this clan for the past 2.25 centuries or so. Suffice it to say that the Crosby family tree includes a truly dizzying array of U.S. senators and congressmen, state senators and assemblymen, governors, mayors, judges, Supreme Court justices, Revolutionary and Civil War generals, signer of the Declaration of Independence, and members of the Continental Congress. It also includes, I should hasten to add, for those of you with a taste for such things, more than a few high-ranking Freemasons. And we will go into Freemasons too as this channel progresses. Stephen Van Rensselaer III, for example, reportedly served as Grand Master of Masons for New York. And if all that wasn't impressive enough, according to the New England Genealogical Society, David Van Cortlandt Crosby is also a direct descendant of Founding Fathers and Federalist Papers authors Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. Yeah, these people, they just up and made it famous and started a band and kicked ass and was taking names and no, none of it's true. It was all contrived, and I'm sad to say. Anyway, moving on. Another shining star on the Laurel Canyon scene just a few years later will be singer-songwriter Jackson Browne, who is, coinkydink, the product of a career military family. Brown's father was assigned to post-war reconstruction work in Germany, which very likely means that he was in the employ of the OSS, precursor to the CIA. That goes back to Paperclip. Yeah, I got to show y'all a picture. I took a snapshot. I put out a video on the CIA and Operation Mockingbird and the CIA or somebody. I don't know. You guys will have to tell me. Is it really the CIA or somebody messing with me? But it was a comment, and it's got the CIA logo. And then just eyes, like they're watching me or something, you know. You can't put anything on YouTube anymore without being flagged. It's ridiculous. All right. Mike Nesmith of the Monkees and Corey Wells of Three Dog Night, two more hugely successful Laurel Canyon bands, both arrived in L.A. not long after serving time with the U.S. Air Force. Nesmith also inherited a family fortune estimated at $25 million. Graham Parsons, who would briefly replace David Crosby and the Byrds before fronting the Flying Burrito Brothers, was the son of Major Cecil Ingram Kundal Connor II, a decorated military officer and bomber pilot who reportedly flew over 50 combat missions. Parson was also an heir on his mother's side to the formidable Snively family fortune, said to be the wealthiest family in the executive enclave of Winter Haven, Florida. The Snively family was the proud owner of Snively Groves Incorporated, which reportedly owned as much as a third of all the citrus groves in the state of Florida. And that's it for this article, you guys. We'll go deeper into it. We'll just keep branching out from here. We'll go from beginning to end to the middle and if you guys want to know about anything, just let me know, and I'll do my best to research it and get the information out there. Again, this is winterwatch.net, and I'll leave the link in the description, so you guys can look it up. And there's videos in here. I'm afraid to play them because of copyright. I just don't know if I'll get some kind of smack on the nose, you know what I'm saying, from YouTube or whoever. But anyway, if you guys like it, leave a like and leave me a comment. Let me know what you want to talk about, and we'll talk about it. Maybe one day we'll do a live stream. I don't know. We'll just have to play it by ear. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Everyone have